Good morning. So I'd ask you how you're doing, but I'd either get a group of responses or awkward silence, and either one of those is favorable. So why don't you just make a noise, like describing how you're feeling right now? Okay, I made a prediction as to how you guys would be doing. Christopher, why don't you put the slide up? Oh, okay, sorry. I underestimated your spirits. I'm not the kind of person to quote the Bible that much, and I'm also not the kind of person to listen when someone else is quoting the Bible. But I did stumble on this verse, and I thought it was applicable. It says, Job 33:14, God does speak now one way, now another, though man may not perceive it. And I guess that's what we're doing here. We're perceiving that second way he speaks to us. I could be completely misinterpreting it, but my arrogance will never allow me to admit that, so I'm not going to. How many of you have seen Inception? How many of you completely understood it the first time you saw it? There's always one. Yeah. I'm not the kind of, okay, pretend I just forget the last 10 seconds. When I watch a movie, I don't naturally look for biblical parallels, but I do see a way to apply the themes to my general understanding. And for this one, I thought it was, an especially appropriate movie to discuss the themes of certainty. For me personally, this is a movie about characters who are trying to find some sort of reality they can hold on to, and I think this is something we can all relate to. Both as Christians and as people, we kind of want something constant in our lives, and for many of us, that's our faith in God. But I want to go into the nature of this faith. What do we mean when we use the word? Is it a passive faith where we just kind of not question things, or is it a more deliberate faith? And can we have this faith and doubt at the same time? So let's just play the first clip. So one thing I notice when I'm watching this is Ariadne, she's the character in this scene. Well, if you don't understand, if you haven't seen the movie, what's happening is these two characters, they're sort of in this shared dream state, and one of them points out to the other one that they are dreaming, and her mind has such a violent reaction to this idea, and it's a recurring theme throughout the movie that the human brain treats foreign ideas like a parasite, and it tries to eradicate it as soon as possible. It's an anomaly, really. So, her world, it quite literally collapses upon the realization that it doesn't exist. And this isn't too far from reality, I don't think. When I was a lot younger, my world collapsed when I learned that the East Coast had washing machines. I had this sort of preconceived notion that they were all colonists in the 18th century who were trying to break away from Britain. And so when I went there, I thought that I would have to modernize them with my advanced Western ways, and it turned out they really didn't need modernizing. That was my sort of reality check there. And then another thing he mentions is the idea of our minds creating and perceiving our world simultaneously while in a dream state. Throughout the movie, these characters aren't navigating an objective physical world of things, but rather a subjective world of thought. The existence of things in a dream is directly related to their perception of said things. In simpler terms, in a dream, your personal experience alters your environment, which is an inversion of how the real world works. I don't know, I guess that wasn't that much simpler, but you'll see why this is important later. So for those of you who haven't seen it or have forgotten, here's the basic premise of the story. It focuses on Dominique, or Dom Cobb, who is an extractor, a sort of con artist that uses dream share technology to enter a subject's mind through their dreams. He travels the world getting hired by major corporations to sabotage other corporations by targeting high-level executives and stealing vital information from their minds. If you're already confused, don't worry, it gets a lot more confusing. Cobb was forced to leave the United States when he was framed for murder and has been trying to find a way back ever since in order to see his children. The movie starts when he and another extractor, Arthur, are hired to perform extraction on Saito, the head of a major energy corporation, and they fail. This next clip takes place right after that scene, so let's play that. So Saito, the man whose mind they were paid to infiltrate, it turns out he actually had let them into his mind on purpose as an audition for a sort of job he wanted them to pull off. What's happening is his like he's already said, his main competitor is sort of this giant energy monopoly that is soon going to be inherited by the CEO's son, and he wants to convince that son to break up the empire. And so what happens is he finds a team of people, and the rest of the movie is focused on accomplishing that. One thing in this scene that really stands out to me is Saito offers Cobb the choice between taking a leap of faith or becoming an old man filled with regret, waiting to die alone, as he puts it. And on the surface, this seems like a fairly simple idea. He's saying, you can trust me to do what you want me to do, or you can just stay here and then live here forever. But as we go further into the movie, we see the deeper implications of this idea. These characters, they exist in a world where reality isn't as objective as we have it, as they'd like it to be. There has been technology created which allows them to experience a fictionalized world. And because of this, they almost kind of have to admit that they themselves might already be in one. They can't definitively prove that they're not. And this is a big concept that is described, a lot outside of this movie and religion. But in order for people to live effectively, we kind of need to take a leap of faith of sorts. We need to believe in something. We need to believe that a world is real. And this is what these characters are doing. They, along with the majority of society, we have to believe that something we do matters so that we can operate effectively. And the film proposes two separate ideas of reality. The first one is a familiar one. There's a clear distinction between the dream world and the real world. You can go into a dream and within a dream, and you can go down all the levels you want, but there is an upper level. There is a real reality that you can't go any higher than that. And we're comfortable with this idea because we always return to a certain point. But a more relativistic view, however, is presented in the form of Mal, Dom's deceased wife, who has been haunting his dreams ever since her death at some point, like at events prior to the film. She was once a dream architect, much like Dom, and they together went deeper and deeper into the science and spent so much time in their constructed dream space that Mal had lost track of which world is real and which is not. In fact, she intentionally locks away any memories of her old reality in order to accept her new one. Through this action, she implicitly states that there is no one objective reality, but rather that reality is merely a product of one's own perception. She holds that her new world is no less real than her old one, simply because that is what she believes. Her view isn't exactly without merit either, and she's not alone in this. Almost every character in the movie, actually, is very morally ambiguous. You've just seen Saito's kind of motivation, this sort of utilitarian motivation of, I need to do this to this person, and it will benefit the world overall. He explains this later on in a later scene that his motivation for entering this man's mind is that if his company dominates the energy business, the world's economy will crash, and he's trying to do something good for everyone by sacrificing one person. And this is a defensible statement or a belief, but it is, and yet another form of relativism. And it has dangerous implications, just both for us and for the characters. We as the audience are led to believe that Mal selfishly abandons the responsibility of her own world in order to live in a more favorable one, and in the process neglects her own family. And this is the problem a lot of theists and Christians and other proponents of objective morality have with subjective morality. And if applied in the most broad, extreme sense, that it means there is no morality. Moral values are up to each individual, and the effect is something very similar to anarchy. For many, the solution is to assign all moral authority to God, an eternal, omnipotent, infallible, merciful being. After all, if anyone is qualified to single-handedly determine ethics, it's him, right? And the characters in the story have a very similar solution to avoid making the same mistakes as Mal did. They use something called a totem, a small, unique object, the properties of which are only known to the owner, which they use to personally determine if they are dreaming or not. Mal, later Cobb's totem is a top in which the dream world spins infinitely. In the dream world, it spins infinitely. I should have said that better. Mal's action of purposely forgetting the real world is symbolized by her locking the top in a vault, never to spin again. She gives the idea a definitive conclusion. And I think we do this a lot more than we'd like to admit. We conclude things that have no business being concluded. How else really can we maintain our sanity with so much uncertainty in the world? If there's no right answer, no real world, then what is the point? What is the point of anything? And this isn't a question asked exclusively by depressed teenagers. The Bible even has one of these emotional fits in Ecclesiastes 1:2. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. This is kind of a joke verse of the Bible. People like to tease it for being the point where the writer of Ecclesiastes kind of quits. And humanizes him and makes it to a level that we can understand it. But what is our way of coping with this? Well, let's look at the ending of the movie. I'm not going to look at the ending of the movie, but the ending of the movie, what happens is Cobb finally arrives at home after the events have concluded, and as his kids are being brought to him, he kind of out of habit spins the top on a table, one last time to see if it falls and to test whether his world is real. But before the top can do its thing, the kids they arrive and he completely forgets about it. He's so happy to see them, he runs to them, and they are together living happily, and the camera focuses on the top, which wobbles but it doesn't fall, leaving it up to the audience to decide whether Cobb was dreaming the entire time. And this is a subject of a lot of debate, whether it was a dream or not, but I don't even think that's the important part of this scene. At the sight of his children, Cobb has decided that he's content with this reality, regardless of if it's real or not. He doesn't even bother to see what the top tells him. He's finally made it to the end of the line. He's done his job. He sees no reason to undo everything he's done. So he's kind of taken this leap of faith, decided that this is the world he wants to live in, because in order to function properly as a human being, he needs to decide eventually that his world is real. But there's an even more important thing about this, is that he even spins the top in the first place, I find interesting. He never had any reason prior to believe that he was dreaming. So this is almost kind of an out-of-character thing for him. As a guy who is coming back from the loss of his wife, who died purely because she couldn't differentiate reality from fiction, he's spent his entire life learning how to tell the difference, and even now he's questioning his reality. You've probably heard this story about the blind man and the elephant, but if you haven't, it goes like this. 6 blind men were asked to determine what an elephant looked like by feeling different parts of the elephant's body. The blind man who feels a leg says the elephant is like a pillar. The one who feels the tail says the elephant is like a rope. The one who feels the trunk says the elephant is like a tree branch. And the one who feels the ear says the elephant is like a hand fan. The one who smells the belly says the elephant is like a wall. And the one who feels the tusk says the elephant is like a solid pipe. A king explains to them, all of you are right. The reason every one of you is telling it differently is because each one of you touched the different part of the elephant. So actually, the elephant has all the features you mentioned. And perhaps we can look at morality in much the same way. After all, just because each person experienced a different part of the elephant doesn't mean that there isn't an elephant. And in the same way, just because we all have different views on reality, morality, and God, doesn't mean that none of those exist. It simply means that our world is far bigger, more complex, and more interesting than we originally thought. I really like this quote from another movie, The Life of Pi, where a character says, doubt is useful, it makes faith a living thing. You cannot know the strength of your faith unless you have doubt. And I would take this a step further, even to say that you can't have faith without doubt. It is, without doubt, faith is simply habit, and that sort of passive faith I was describing before. When I was younger, I was a lot more mentally disciplined. I policed my thoughts because I was afraid of thinking things that God didn't like. And I think now that God isn't this way. Proverbs 18:15, the heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, the ears of the wise seek it out. This isn't a God who wants us to come closer to him by ignoring the facts. This is a God who wants us to come closer to him by way of knowledge. So don't be afraid of foreign ideas, even the ones that question or could potentially compromise your worldview. Not saying that you have to change any of those things, but you will now have believed those for a very different reason. As the film shows us, ideas can bring our world down, but they can also build new worlds up. I think the first step in coming closer to a universal God is stepping out of our closed universe. So as we go through this the rest of this Apocalypse series, just be more open to different ways in which God is making himself known to us. Thank you.